Great job, you guys. Thank you. Well, I am feeling much better this week than I was last week. I just got to tell you that. I appreciate those of you who reached out, and for those others in the room who've already experienced this wonderful virus going around, welcome to the club. And also, we're thankful that means some of us now have antibodies, so we feel a little invincible for a moment. Yes, my name is Brad. I am the pastor here at Woodlawn, and God's doing some really interesting things. And so today's message is going to be a little different than normal for me. It's going to be a little bit history telling, a little bit Bible teaching, and you're giving me signals. What are you telling me to do here? This one? Yeah, we're just going to turn that baby off. There we go. My wife wanted to see me better. That was the real issue, was that she didn't feel like she could see me well enough. Thank you, baby. I'm 48 years old. I was called into ministry when I was a teenager, and I hated the idea. Still sometimes. Had big plans, much different than pastoring. I had met a lot of pastors. I did not like most of them. Some of you are like, I get it. I just couldn't understand why God would have any desire whatsoever to use me in that way. So I remember making deals with him, like, okay, Lord, I'll get a good job. I'll be one of those faithful tithers. Pastors love those people. I will be that guy. That's what I'll do. I'll make a lot of money. I'll give a good portion of it to the church. Let me do that, Lord. And the Lord said, I would love for lots of people to do that. You guys hear that message from the Lord, right? But that's not my calling for you. I want you to do this. And so becoming a pastor, I remember growing up in a church where from the outside looking in, it looked like everything was easy. Like the staff always handled everything. I grew up in a wonderful church here in Paducah, one of the larger Baptist churches. And my uncle was the pastor, and he always smiled when he talked about deacons. And he always seemed like he was happy on stage. And I just thought he had just the easiest job in the world, where everybody was always happy. Everybody behaved as Christians in their interaction and business work with the church. And all he got to do was stand up on Sundays and talk about the Bible. That seemed like a pretty decent job. And then I became a pastor for the first time. My first ministry position was that I was a youth pastor of a church here in Reedland, actually Reedland Baptist. I was 19 years old. Their teenagers were all 16 and 17. They had 4 bowling lanes and a full gymnasium and 7 teenagers. And they just told me to do anything and everything I had to do to get more. Now, I didn't know there were rules associated with that. I just knew if you've got budget and a gym and a bowling alley, I can throw a party. Like, I can do that. And a bunch of teenagers started showing up. And then shortly thereafter, God called me to a little church in Western Tennessee where the pastor was 83 years old. And he was very set in his ways. He was a good old man. But a lot of my shenanigans from Reedland Baptist just did not set so well, in his mind. Shortly thereafter, God called me to be the senior pastor of a church in far southwestern Tennessee, a little town called Bolivar, Tennessee, that I hope you never have to go to. It was really interesting. So I was raised in a church of 1,500. I then became the youth pastor of a church of 400. I then became the associate pastor of a church of 150. And then I became the senior pastor of a church of 30. And that's a culture shock. My very first meeting ever in a church, ever, with our leaders was because the word had gotten out that I had invited people to church whose skin tone was a bit darker than mine. And there had been a disagreement about this as to whether or not I should do so. And I was set very straight in that meeting that was not going to happen in this particular church. And I remember walking out at, 20 years old, trying to find the right way to write my resignation so that I could preach it in such a loud and boisterous way that I would just tell them all where I thought they should go and what I thought of their opinions, My mentor and pastor at the time convinced me not to do so, to stick it out, to preach truth, and then go through college and seminary and all that. Ended up pastoring a church outside of Louisville, where a lot of struggle and challenge had happened. Prior to me, the pastor had been fired for drug addiction. and one of their greatest leaders had lost their daughter after having a huge fight with her. She ran out of the house, jumped in the car with her husband, drove down the road, and ran into a concrete wall, killing both of them. And I stepped into that role of pain and struggle that church was going through. 4 years later, I'm just kind of fed up with church. I just don't understand why anybody goes to church at the time, and struggled with the whole thing. I love Jesus, love the Bible, but could not figure out what in the world was so important about this messed up group of Christians that I had seen behind the scenes and all of their shenanigans that went along with ridiculous behavior from time to time. And my mentor at the time looked across the table at me and said, God's calling you to plant churches. You should do something fresh, new. You should plant a new church. So at 25 years old, we moved back to Western Kentucky, and we planted a church on the south side of Paducah. Ironically, for those of you who've been a part of Woodlawn for a long time, one of our earliest couples who wanted to join in on with us with that process was the former youth pastor and his wife, who were here at Woodlawn, Darren and Joy Lampley, friends and family members to many of you. During the next 12 or 13 years, God taught me a lot of ridiculous lessons, just things that I never expected to see him do. And we experimented with all different kinds of ideas, things. What could happen if we made the music at church a little more, sound a little more like what people listen to on the radio? Or what if the dress code at church was a little bit more like people normally like to wear on the weekends? Or what if the atmosphere at church was a little bit less formal and a little bit more relaxed and fun-loving? And little by little, what we saw was not just a local thing happen, but that nationally we saw from the late 1980s until now, we saw kind of the redirection and restructuring of most churches in America. For instance, just for fun, how many of you in this room went to church growing up, but even as a child, you dressed kind of fancy? How many of you dressed kind of fancy today? Not many of us. Just like, I'm fancy. That's right. Yeah, I walked in with a suit coat over top of my golf shirt, and people started teasing me, okay, like joking with me about that. That's a cultural shift that's happened much over time. Now, most of those cultural shifts are things that I personally am just very thankful for. I think that's a really good thing, that the church is more approachable and more warm to people, and easier for anybody and everybody to show up at and feel wanted and welcome. Those are all good things. What I did not expect in the development of church over time was that we as Christians would start to gauge and judge churches with a different set of standards than before. Now I talk to people on a regular basis who went and tried out a new church, and I say, "What'd you think?" And they say stuff like, "The music was rocking," or "The pastor's fashion was quite hip," or "The lighting and smoke were just ridiculous." All of a sudden, I realized, by the way, I love a great show. I have no problem with well-done production. All of that is wonderful, and I'm not knocking any church that kind of steers into that and uses those things for the glory of God, so I'm not knocking those things. But I am somewhat questioning us at times, that we would question the people we want to do our life with based upon how cool their smoke machine is. Think about that, really, right? Think about that. And so I tell you today the things I'm telling you because I want you to know where we are as a church. We are Woodlawn Church. And the answer to who are we as Woodlawn Church really requires a lot of detail to answer it. If I were to say, how many of you would say I was Woodlawn Church 6 months ago? There would be, I don't know, half the room or 30% of the room or something like that would raise their hand and say, yeah, it's me. It's a great group of people. Those folks are dedicated, hardworking, committed, and they just stick to it, man. They just do. And I'm proud to know you. There are also of you who are in the room are like, for the last few months, I've been about this Who Woodlawn thing, and I'm praying about it. I'm excited about it. I have no idea what it means, but I'm excited about it. I like these people. They seem really exciting and nice and kind and genuine and authentic. So yes, we are Woodlawn, like I'm there. And then there's probably a small portion of the room who would say, today's my first day, bro. I have no idea what you're talking about. We are not Woodlawn yet. I hope it's a good day. I hope it's a good day. We want it to be a good day. That sporadic and kind of unique difference of opinion in the room or difference of perspective is welcoming and comfortable and good. And I hope that you see it as a positive thing. Because see, where you are today is that you are in a room with people who are each as equally pushed against the equilibrium of normal, and everybody's in the midst of going, I wonder what's going to happen next. Like everybody's kind of in the midst of, I wonder what the future looks like. I wonder what I'm supposed to feel right now. There are some who are going to be dealing with, man, I really hope we go down that road. And others going, man, that road is really scary. I'm not sure about that one at all. Maybe we go down this other road, and that's okay. Because right now what we're not doing is trying to define exact outward expressions. We're not trying to fit into an exact musical mold. We're not trying to fit into an exact cultural mold. We're not trying to fit into an exact specific denominational mold. As much as we are, we're really trying to make sure that we care about one another and that we honor Jesus with our life. Just like the scripture says, we love God and we love our neighbor. Those two things. So we're figuring that out. Now, this gets uncomfortable because for a lot of us, especially in the American church, we've been told we were doing that just by attending an event. But in reality, we didn't know the names of the people around us. We didn't know the names of the people across the way. We didn't have any real relational connection to our church. It was just a place we went and watched. But we're going to be a lot more than a place where we go and watch. We are a group of people who are coming together to honor God with our lives, but also to learn from his word and also to live it out in the way that we express the love of Jesus day to day, person to person, neighbor to neighbor, friend to friend. And so that brings us to where we are today. Now, as a leader over time, one of the things that I have become quite excellent at is misunderstanding. Anybody else really good at this? You're just really good at either misunderstanding or being misunderstood. So that's our topic for the day. We're going to deal with that. I'm going to read from Philippians, where we've been for the past few weeks, and then we'll see what Paul does, the writer of Philippians, as he deals with the potential misunderstanding that's happening right in the midst of things here. So let me see if I got this thing working here. Yeah. Let's read this together. Philippians 4:10, and we're going to go all the way down to 13 or 14, I believe. It says, I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now at length you have revived your concern for me. As I read this, I want you to be willing to just kind of notice the potential misunderstandings even as we read, okay? I'll read it again. I rejoiced greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned for me, but you had no opportunity to show it. There we go. I went too far. Sorry about that. That's 10. Not that I am speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In other words, to have plenty or more than enough. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. And then he has the famous verse, I can do all things through him, or through Christ, who strengthens me. Now, as I read that, I don't know if you noticed at least two potential big misunderstandings, but they happen, and Paul does such an interesting job teaching us how it is that he should go about explaining this. Have you guys ever been misunderstood? You ever say something and it just kind of gets away with you, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that's what they thought I meant, It has happened a lot to me. There is one that some of you have heard before, but it's a true story, and I have to tell it because we all got to get on the same page with how stupid that I can be at times. Stephanie and I have been married for, we're coming on 30 years in a few years, and several years into this, I'm kind of an emotional person, like I'm the guy that when you're out in public and your children bring a little kitten up to you and they say, Daddy, we just found a cat, it's going to die, can we bring it home? I'm the guy that goes, well, throw it in the car, baby, let's go get it something to eat. That's me. My wife is like, let it die. Not exactly, but Some of you are married to those people, aren't you? You're like, I don't like cats. I'm in Florida. This is, 15 years ago or so. Our children are probably 2 and 6, maybe, something like that, our 2 boys. I'm in Florida. There's this organization called Compassion International. Have you ever heard of the organization? Compassion International is a support organization for orphans, okay? It's one of those organizations where they show you a photograph of a beautiful little girl or a little boy, and they say to you, for $29 a month, you can help this child have health care and food and education and learn about Jesus, right? Well, I don't know what was going on with me that month, but I was at this huge pastor's conference at First Baptist Orlando. There were thousands and thousands of church planters like me. There were moving, preaching, like this guy named Francis Chan was speaking at the time. Like it was just, I was overwhelmed, and I was in this place where my heartbeat was right there ready to do whatever God says. You know what I mean? And Stephanie knew it, and that's a scary thing, to be married to me when I'm like in this spot where whatever the Lord says, I'm just saying yes, okay? And so I'm walking around, and I come upon this table, and there are these well-meaning college students, and they have these pictures of little kids, and they're talking to me, and they say to me, don't you have $29 a month that you could give to a child to help them not die? They didn't say it, but that's what it felt like to me. And I remember picking up the first photo. She was a dark-complected, dark-headed little girl from Honduras, and her name was Hilarice Urbane. And I thought, she looks just like my wife when she was little. She looks just like Stephanie. She's so beautiful. Hilarice is. And so I called Stephanie, and I'm crying like a total idiot. I'm just literally like snot and tears, and I'm standing in the Orlando First Baptist Church's vestibule, and I'm crying, and I said, baby, you're never going to believe it. The Lord has called us to take care of this little girl. I found her. Her name is Hilarice, and I have no doubt, Lord, that God is calling us to adopt her. I misunderstood the word sponsor and adopt. You guys see where this is going? Okay. I felt the Lord was telling me to commit $29 a month to Hilarice Urbane. And I called my wife on the phone through tears and said, the Lord has called me to adopt this little girl. And my good woman of a wife basically says, baby, whatever the Lord tells you to do, we'll do it. And gets off the phone. And she has her 4-year-old and her 6-year-old and her 2-year-old that she's holding on to. And I'm bringing one home from Guatemala, I remember thinking, Stephanie seemed to take that phone call a little harder than I expected her to. It didn't seem normal. I would have thought that's a similar conversation to, hey, baby, I know we don't have Netflix, but I would like to get Netflix. It's only $20 a month. Like that's kind of what I thought the conversation would have been like. But Stephanie was like, oh, honey, we can fast and pray and get everyone involved, and the church can help us raise the money and all this stuff. And I'm going, it's just $29 a month, baby. I don't understand what you're so focused on. It wasn't until a phone call or two later that I realized I had said adopt, and I meant sponsor. You guys get the misunderstanding there? I realized that day how much my wife loved me and trusted me, and was willing to go with whatever. Since then, chose not to press that one anymore. Have you ever been misunderstood very, greatly? That one was laughable. That one was fun. But sometimes huge misunderstandings are hurtful, right? Sometimes you say things, or you lead things, or you're in conversations, and people misunderstand you in such a way that now they're offended. Now they're hurt. Now they're distant from you. And if you don't watch out, you literally have no clue why they're bothered. Like you have no idea what you said or what you did that would cause them the distress that they are feeling. Anybody ever been there? Okay. Now, I got to tell you, in a world where communication is so quick and so instant, and where things like social media put information out there and it stays forever and you can't get rid of it, and in a world where misunderstandings spread like wildfire, and quotes from sermons that are a little bit out of context can go anywhere, like it's a little scary when you start thinking about how easily it is to be misunderstood, how much damage a misunderstanding can do, and then really long-term how much damage a misquote or a being misunderstood could cause, you know? So I love, as I read this text that we're looking at today, and as I think about being your pastor, and as I think about the leadership processes here and the steps that we're taking over the next few weeks and months, I love how the Apostle Paul handles the potential misunderstandings that are in this particular few verses of Scripture. So let's read again. And this time I want you to just think about, these are the things that the Apostle Paul is showing us. He's showing us the importance of, if you're going to lead, and if you're going to communicate well as a leader, then there are some things that you have to make sure are standardized or normal in the way that you lead, or there will be lots and lots of misunderstandings. One of them is you got to have a constant, normal biblical worldview. Like, you guys don't know me very well, most of you, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I hope that our time together is such that you go, you know what? I don't always agree with that guy, but that guy always does everything he can to stick with a biblical worldview. Like, he really, really tries. He really tries. Like, that's, and therefore you can give leaders the benefit of the doubt when you go, like, I know it's where he's trying to stay, you know, whether he's right or wrong or indifferent, that's one thing, but he's trying to stay. Like, and that's going to be true in your marriages and friendships, is like you begin to trust that the overall norm for this person is set in this direction, and I can kind of trust that that's the reality of who they are. Paul does that. Paul's also attentive to life experiences. Like, he's paying attention to what's going on in people's lives outside of the text. He's paying attention to the cultural realities, to the things that they're facing, to the things that come from kind of the difficulties of being a Christian in the first century. All of that stuff's real in the Apostle Paul's mind. And then specifically, what I'm talking about right now is that the Apostle Paul's very intentional to care for what he says and how he's heard. Now, I think this is a mark between maturity and immaturity when it comes to communication. Because in my mid-20s, all I cared about is what I meant. You'd get mad at me and I'd be like, but that's not what I meant. Well, it doesn't matter what you meant. This is what I heard. Well, I don't care what you heard. This is what I meant. You ever been in that fight before? Yes, you have. Some of you, you may not have used those words, but that's not what I said. That is what you said. It's not what I meant. It's what I heard. I don't care what you heard. That's what I said. Right? That's back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. The Apostle Paul shows us as the example in this text that not only is he concerned about what it is that he said, but he's also very concerned about how he's being heard. And that's just a very, very wise level of counsel for any of us communicating with other human beings. Okay, whether you're in leadership or in partnership, in friendship or marriage, is to care about how you're being heard. So let's look at the text again, and you see if you can head off at the pass some of the potential misunderstandings. The Apostle Paul says, I rejoiced in the Lord greatly. By the way, greatly, it's a word of, it's an expression of celebration, okay? He's like, I am throwing a party here at length, which means this has been going on for a while. I have needed this party for a while. I have felt a bit dry from this joy for a while, okay? He's saying, I rejoice in the Lord greatly that now at length you have revived your concern for me. Anybody catch a potential misunderstanding right there? You have revived your concern for me. I automatically hear people going, Paul thinks we never cared about him. Paul thinks we didn't care about him at all. Paul thinks we were just ignoring him. Paul thinks we weren't listening to him. Did you hear that backhanded compliment that he just gave us? Revived our concern for him. Now, I'm not making this up. It's real. It's there. That reality of someone going, well, who does he think, finish it, he is? Revived our concern for him. I know that this matters to Paul because I'm about to read to you what he writes in the very next verse. okay? There is absolutely no reason for him to write what he writes in the very next verse if that question doesn't exist in people's minds. He's saying to them, I'm celebrating, and it's a long time coming that you have revived your concern for me. And then there's the unspoken, not in the text, well, do you think we weren't concerned for you? And then he says this is what he says, you were indeed concerned for me, but you had no opportunity. Like, have you ever done that? Have you ever said something and the person you're talking to doesn't even have to say the response to it, but you know the response to it, so you have to jump to the next sentence? Right? That's what's happening here, okay? That's what's happening. Is he has said something, and then in some senses it's a letter, so it's not like he's right in the midst of a conversation, but in the midst of that goes, time out. I want to make sure you understand what I just meant by what I just said, okay? So if this were a conversation, it would be one of those moments where you look at your spouse or your friend and you say something that you think is just honest and true and good, but then their facial expression shows you that they did not hear exactly what you intended to say. They heard something else. You said, that's not my favorite color on you, honey. And they heard you say, I look horrible. And then you go, oh, that's not what I meant. What I meant was that I really, really like you in that other color. Oh, that's not what I meant. What I meant was, see, this is kind of the tension that we're feeling here. Paul says, I'm greatly excited. I'm celebrating this has been over time that you have renewed your concern for me. And then he immediately goes, you were indeed concerned for me, but you had no opportunity. Now, in order to understand exactly what's happening here, we actually have to take a jump into another passage of Scripture where Paul teaches us what he's been teaching all Christians about connecting concern with gift. So to be clear, Paul is talking about their financial support of him, okay, and the fact that he's needed some of those things. And then he's dealt with this with other Christians in other letters and other times. So let's jump over to the Corinthian church for just a moment and let's learn what he told the pastor, the folks at the church at Corinth. He says in 2 Corinthians 8:10, he says, and in this matter I give my judgment. This benefits you who a year ago started not only to do this work, but also to desire to do it. Now think about that. Paul is saying that there is a connection between when we actually accomplish something and when we set out to accomplish it. Like the desire to do it is equally as important as the action of doing it. You ever thought about this? See, sometimes in our world, we're so accomplishment focused that we make desire to do something seem weak. And it only counts once you've actually done it. But that's not what Paul is saying at all. In fact, let's keep going. He says, so now finish doing it. This is in 2 Corinthians, right? Finish doing it as well, so that your readiness in desiring may be matched by your completing it in what you've done. So there's this huge connection between the desire and the completion. The desire and the completion. The desire and the completion. Okay, one more. For if the readiness is there, the desire is there, it's acceptable according to what a person has, not according to what he does not have. He's literally telling the Corinthian Christians that some of them want to do more than they can, and that God's accreditation to them is more in their want to than in their actualization. Isn't that pretty cool? Like God is saying, I'm judging you based upon what I know you want to do, not just on what you can or can't do. Let me ask you a second. Have you ever wished you could do more than you could do? Think about it, just for anything. Have you ever wished that you had more power than you have to do something good in the world? Have you ever wished that there was just something else you could do beyond what you can do? It shows up in my life like this. Someone's facing a trauma. I get on the phone with them or I go see them, and I talk to them and I say, how can I help you? And you guys know exactly how this conversation goes. I say, how can I help you? And they say, for now, just pray. Which for the longest time as a young man, I used to think was a stupid cop-out. Like, well, what good is there doing that? I want to fix this. I want to do something. Show me something I can hammer. Show me something I can carry. Show me something I can pay for. Show me something I can, tell me something I can go get. And then people would say, no, just pray. You're thinking, did my pastor just say that? Yeah, I'm telling you, as a young man, I remember thinking that just praying was like what lazy people say they'll do. Because I wanted to act. I wanted to do something, right? Y'all pray to Jesus, I'm going to go answer those prayers. I got actions. That's what was in my head, okay? And so, but now you find yourself going, wait a second. I'm looking into this person's life, and I'm honestly thinking there's absolutely nothing I can do for them, except for I can pray for them, and I can be available to them. And then all of a sudden you get a little bit older, and your body goes a little bit, not quite as young and healthy and whatever as you want, and you begin to realize that someone who's genuinely willing to pray for you and be there for you is the best friend you got. That's the best thing they can do. So I'm telling you all this to say that, listen, desire and determination are a huge part of accomplishment and achievement. Desire and accumulate, like just wanting to do it. I'm convinced of this. I'm convinced that there's something beautiful about a healthy desire to honor God with your life. A healthy determination to accomplish more than what you can accomplish. A desire to go beyond the limits that seem to be there for you. A desire to go beyond what the norm is, what people expect from you. There are not that many people in the world, quite frankly, who desire to do more than is expected of them. There really aren't. And Paul is making it really clear that in this moment, that even in the midst, and we're going to get back to Philippians in just a second, but in the midst of what's happening in the church in Macedonia and the church in Corinth as they try to send help to the church of Jerusalem, is that they want to do it so badly. They want it so badly that they're being judged by the pureness of their heart and their desire. And then Paul is saying, all right then, well, go ahead and finish what you've started. Go ahead and accomplish what you set out to do. And that's why it's important in this particular text that we get this. Is this, I'm going to go back to the scripture. The scripture says this again. He says, I rejoice in the Lord greatly that now at length you have revived your concern for me. You were indeed concerned, but you had no opportunity. What he's helping them see in the Philippian church is that their desire to help him is a wonderful thing. Their desire that even though he might not have known about their desire, he might not have felt their desire, but the Lord knew those things, the Lord recognizes those things, and now he's helping them see that desire has bloomed, that desire is growing, that desire is coming to a place where, guess what? Now's the time. You can actually do what you've desired to do for so long. And God's connecting your anticipation and your commitment with opportunity and potential. You were indeed concerned for me, but you didn't have any opportunity at the time. But I'm celebrating, he says, right now, because after a long time of there being no opportunity, now there is one. Now there is one. The second misunderstanding that can happen here, it's not going to be on the screen already. He says, I rejoice greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had not any opportunity to show it. People in the early church knew that this was about money, that this concern wasn't just an emotion, right? Paul is asking for an offering. And so what do you think the second potential misunderstanding is? Well, Paul loves money. Paul just wants our money. Now, when I was a young man, pastors got picked on about that all the time. I remember, being 21 years old and, had my first checkbook. You know what I mean? Like I was just learning about my own money. And now I'm pastoring people, and there were always the middle-aged or older men, my age men now, or a little older than I am now, would meet me at the back and say something like, well, preacher, you're trying to get my checkbook again today, I see. Everybody under 40 is like, what is a checkbook? Okay. Trying to get in my Cash App, right? Trying to do that. I get it. I remember thinking, sir, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know. I know you're teasing me. I know we're just playing, okay? I know this is just a joke, but I have no idea what you're talking about at all, you know? I really don't. And then over time, being able to see the way that God takes people and uses all of the things that are a part of their life and then turns their life into something that's bigger and more beautiful than what their life would have ever been without him. It really is wonderful to view the world through that lens, that it makes me sad when I see someone who's so focused on something like $1 that's all they're seeing, you know? But Paul recognizes it right here, that it's true in every church in history, all of it. The truth is, especially in our world, money's a painful reality, isn't it, right? Let's just be honest. By the way, I'm not asking for any today. This is not really what we're talking about. So just everybody go, okay. That's not what we're pushing for. But I want you to see the potential misunderstanding here is that Paul recognizes that, wait a second. These people might be tempted to think that I love money and I don't love them. And that's why he says what he says in the second half of that scripture. Because again, if you read it as if there's no interaction with the people he's writing to and no potential response from them, you'll go, why did Paul say these things? It doesn't make any sense why Paul jumped right into this. He goes straight from, thank you for helping me. It has made me very happy. Okay? He goes from that into, I know you always loved me. You just didn't have an opportunity for it to become actualized. Okay? But then he goes right in, like no verses, like the very next verse, he goes right into, not that I'm speaking of needing your money, like not that I'm speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. Paul is heading off misunderstandings at the pass by saying, wait a second, I want to make sure you get this. This isn't about me wanting what you have. This is about God using your desires and your hopes and dreams in the life of his growing and expanding church in a way that I, the Apostle Paul, sees as a great blessing, and it makes me really happy. Okay? I'm not speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation I'm in to be content. Then he says, I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In other words, I know how to live on a little, and I know how to live with a lot. I've seen them both. I've done them both. They each have their own usages and moments, and I can be content either way. Okay? Now, we are Western Kentucky Americans. The truth is, on a global sense, most or maybe all of us have never lived in the extreme low or the extreme high when you're talking about global wealth or global poverty. Okay, those two extremes are probably not something most or all, I don't want to assume anything about everybody, but I know most of the folks in this room, I would think for the most part, we have lived our life somewhere in the middle of all of that, okay? But even in the midst of that, there are hills and valleys, there are moments of a lot and moments of a little, and even if you're comparing it just with your own norm, you know what it's like to have less, you know what it's like to have more, okay? And that's what Paul is saying. In any and every circumstance, he says, I have learned the secret of facing plenty or hunger, abundance and need. I've learned the secret, okay? Now, first of all, get this. I'm going to shake your American mind for just a second. Paul is putting plenty in the same dangerous category as hunger. Paul is putting abound in the same dangerous category as need. He's saying, man, I know how the secret of life when I don't have enough. And I also know the secret of life when I have more than enough. Sometimes our American misunderstanding is that, boy, times have been tough. I need Jesus right now. But then 6 months later, you're like, boy, we are rocking and got more than we've ever had. Jesus who? Right? He's saying that for the life of a believer, that there's a secret to life that comes from learning how to live in those moments, okay? Whether it's here or here, both of them require this contentment that comes from a genuine walk with the Lord. Okay? And that's important that we catch that. He says that the secret to life of living in abundance or the secret to life in living in need is I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, or him who strengthens me. So, there's probably at least one person in the room got this verse tatted on the arm, you know. It's a beautiful verse, okay? It's one of my favorites, a great memorization verse. But it can be taken out of context a little bit if we don't watch out. All of a sudden, we're at a softball game, right? And we're talking to our teenager who's about to pitch their first no-hitter, you know, and we're like, you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. I don't even know that that's a bad application of the text. It's just not exactly what's going on here, right? If we don't watch out, you know, like it's, those of you who don't know me very well don't know this, but I'm a little bit of a Kentucky basketball fan. And so it's 5 minutes before tip-off. You know, you're at Fogg Auditorium, and you know, and you're about to play Kansas, and they're only 3 or 4 wins back on the total win. Like, you really want to win this game, and if you don't watch out, you're thinking, okay, Lord, we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. We can do all things through Christ who strengthens us, and that's not really at all what this text is about, right? Okay, it seems so encouraging. We want to say it whenever we can say it. But Paul is making it really clear to his people, okay, that this is the clarity that we need to walk through whatever life faces, knowing that if it's a bunch or if it's not enough, we can trust him as we experience life, through life with him. That's the important reality. And that's important for us as a church. So, you guys got that? Okay. Now, sermon's over. I want to talk to you about the future just a little bit. Just some things, just some stuff. I hope that in getting a little more detail-oriented for a second, that I don't bore you to death, because this is not boring stuff. This is exciting. And whether you are someone who's been a part of Woodlawn for a long, long time, and you remember a few years ago when COVID hit and you had to stop doing certain aspects of ministry that were very valuable and integral to the church, and you kind of wish that we could get back to a place where we did those things. Or maybe you're a part of a group that's wanted to plant a fresh, life-giving church on the south side of Paducah for the past couple of years, and you're finally like, okay, wait, we have what we need to start doing those things. It's time to start moving forward, and you're thinking about those steps, right? Or maybe you're here and you're thinking, you know what? Man, this has been the most lonely 2 years of my life. I just want a church. I want a church that I can be a part of and grow with and get to know, and people who care for my children and all of that stuff, okay? So wherever you are on that spectrum, some of the things I'm about to tell you will just give you some insight as to what steps we're taking, how we're taking them, when we're taking them. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but just a little bit, okay? So let's begin. Worship today started at 10 a.m. That's the last time that will happen. Starting next Sunday, worship will begin at 9:30, okay? There's purpose and reason for that, but let's just say it all out loud. Starting next week, worship will begin at 9:30. I want to give you a little insight. We are going to do Bible study classes for adults, teenagers, and children after the Sunday morning worship service, not before. I want to give you some insight as to why, okay? How many of you were raised in a church where you did like a Sunday school thing before church and then church was after that, right? Most folks don't even really know how that happened or why that developed. That comes from a circuit rider time period where there weren't as many pastors as there were churches. And so a lot of churches throughout the central part of North America would have Sunday school classes every single week, but they would only get to have church services when there was a pastor available. And a lot of times pastors pastored like 4 different churches, which meant they were at that church the first Sunday of the month, that church the second Sunday of the month, that church the third. Denominations like the CP Church or the Southern Baptist Convention or others did their best to help churches grow to the place where they could have one pastor that stayed at one church all the time. And all of a sudden now you could have a church service every week, right? We see that on shows like Little House on the Prairie and Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman and that kind of thing, where that started to happen, where pastors dedicated themselves to a particular town and those churches started to thrive and grow. Little by little, certain denominations devoted a lot of time to those classes and even built buildings where there were much more square footage in classroom space than in worship space, like our facility has, okay? Those classes of spending time together with other Christians, studying the Bible together, teaching children, teaching teenagers, extremely, extremely valuable. So the downside to doing the classes first, and I don't think this is rocket science, okay, is that we're asking people who don't know each other to show up an hour and a half early and sit in a classroom with 8 or 10 people that they've never met before. And to me, to a lot of people, that seems kind of intimidating, like awkward, like not gonna do it. That's what I mean, okay? So you end up with a lot of churches that have 500 people in the church service and 200 people in the classes. Right? It's because they got 200 people extroverted enough to come hang out in a classroom with people that they don't know, and then everybody else just shows up at church with all the normal people. Right? Some of you are like, I get it. So here's what we're doing. We're letting the everybody show up together in one room happen first. Little by little, we don't expect this to happen overnight or in your first gathering, but little by little, you sit around a few people. You meet a few people. You smile at a few people. Little by little, you have the opportunity to catch someone's name. Little by little, they introduce themselves to you. Now you can't keep your children from playing with their children and both of them making noise and you feeling like you're causing a disruption together. You're like, cool, I'm not the only mom whose kid makes noise, right? And then you're like, wait a second. I know you, you know me. Are you in one of those classes? You are. Cool. Can I come to the class that you're in? Or better yet, the person invites you to come join them and be a part of that. So what that means is once these classes are rolling, and I'm about to tell you when that will happen, it means that after this worship gathering's over, you're going to get an invitation. Hey, everybody. We're going to stick around. We're going to have some Bible study classes. We've got stuff for teenagers, stuff for kids. We'd love for you to hang out and enjoy. We're going to have a little snack table. If your belly's growling, we got to get you a granola bar, maybe a glass of orange juice, something like that. We'll go to class. We'll spend some time together. We'll get to know each other. Does that make sense? It's just that simple. All we're doing is taking Sunday school and church and flipping them. It's that simple. But we're doing it with the intentionality of helping people meet people that they don't know yet as well, okay? So that means, let's get this down. This was going to start next week, but we are changing that due to my COVID specifically. We just got pushed back a little bit with me not being able to do my job for the past week. So February 20th, that is 3 weeks from today. That is 2 weeks from next week. We will start those classes. So what that means is that worship will begin at 9:30 and Bible classes will begin at 10:45-ish. Okay? Here's what I mean by ish. We are not quite so scientific that we can tell you exactly how many minutes our adult worship service will last. Okay? In most cases, I think we will start before 10:45. I think we'll be done here in about an hour. Everybody will take 5 to 8 minutes to go to the restroom, get your granola bar or whatever, and go to class. And I think we'll probably be starting those classes at more like 10:38, okay? Something like that. The goal of those classes is to last 1 hour, which means you still get out before lunch and you were at the pizza place before the Southern Baptists. Okay? Get it? That's the goal. You're like, I'm in now. I wasn't sure about this, but now I'm in. I can be to Los Amigos before the Baptist. I'm good. Okay, so let's talk about what that really looks like. So children all the way up to fifth graders, children to fifth graders. Keep in mind, flexibility is key. So when I even list an exact age or bracket, we're trying to be flexible. So don't lock me down too much. But we will have a nursery. We currently have a nursery during this worship service for anybody who wants to utilize it. They go up to 3 years old, I think. But starting in 3 weeks from today, on the 20th, during that second hour of classes, there will be a nursery. There will be a large group for kids K through 5. That means kindergarten through fifth graders will come together in one room where they'll do their own worship service with music and fun teaching and all kinds of stuff. And then they will break into smaller groups for discussion. So imagine one big room with lots of fun, and then the K through third graders sitting on the ground in one circle, and the fourth and fifth graders sitting in the ground in another circle, and different teachers working with them in those different age brackets. Make sense? All of that occurring within about an hour time period. All of that together. We've ordered fantastic literature from Lifeway. It's called Gospel Project. It comes with cool videos and music, and we're renovating some of our rooms and getting it set up so that it will be an exceptional experience. We know that we're starting small. We tried to add up which children will be in that class, and we're probably starting with 10 or fewer kids in the beginning. But I think that's wonderful because it helps those children, many of whom will not know each other in the beginning, get to know each other quickly. It helps them get to know the adults. It helps the adults step into service without being overrun by 38 children, right? It just helps us kind of get the routine and the processes down. And this children's ministry is going to be exceptional for us. We have a few people who are already dedicated to helping do that. My wife, Stephanie, is going to be a part of helping get it launched. And I think she and I have worked together heavily on this kind of thing in the past. So I trust her to do that. And then we'll be raising up leaders, training leaders, helping those leaders find their good fit in that ministry. Okay? Normally I don't do this during sermon, but if you have any questions, it's okay. Like you can wave a hand at me or something and I'll stop for a moment. Are there any questions so far? Just want to make sure that we're being really clear. Next, students and youth, teenagers. That would be 6th graders through 12th graders. During that second hour, starting 3 weeks from today, we have an entire youth room here. That room is currently being looked at for the best ways we can use it for the best ministry. Pastor Todd is our youth pastor and loves students, but we're also raising up other volunteers that will be involved in being involved with students. And so what that will look like is, again, a large group experience where everybody's involved with some stuff together, and then breakouts down the road where you have your middle schoolers in one group and your high schoolers in another, where they work with separate conversations about the topics that we're teaching on. That way, if you're teaching on a topic where a 12th grader and a 6th grader are not really saying the same things yet, that's cool because we got them in 2 separate groups so that they can both have age-appropriate teaching and conversation. Make sense? I know that there are some in this room who are very passionate about this particular area of ministry, and keep in mind, whether it's children or students, you're not going to get out here without me giving you an opportunity to say, I want to be involved. Okay, that's coming. That's coming. I told you I wasn't asking for money today. I didn't tell you I wasn't asking for anything. Right? So keep that in mind. How can I help? You can help by talking to Stephanie Henson. That's my wife for children. Todd Belt, if you want to work with students or youth. And this is the real issue, is you can text the word serve to the phone number that we've gotten to where we use really often, 270-479-0629. Let me give you a little bit of a background on that. Our text community is the primary way we are communicating with people right in the midst of COVID. I know that things like a clipboard with a piece of paper and pass it around and everybody just sign up seems like quick, simple, and easy. But if the first person who touches that clipboard is sick, then everybody else gets it too. So we're just trying to be cautious. We spend just a tiny amount of money on this text community. It is a phenomenal way to communicate. It comes directly to my phone. I'm the only person currently with access to it. And what that means is that when you text anything for the first time to that number, you're going to get a message back that goes, cool, you're joining Woodlawn's text community. Give us a little information about yourself. And you'll say, my name is so-and-so, and my email address is so-and-so, and my cell phone number is this. And it's just real simple. But once you're in, which many, like 60 people here are already in, once you're in, then we get to load keywords. The keyword serve, for instance. If you text the word serve in, then you will automatically have a link sent directly back to you. And that link is a short digital form that you fill out that helps you figure out where you might want to serve. It's going to ask you several questions about different areas of ministry. It's going to talk about your passions, talk about your intrigues, your interests. And in the end, what it does for me is it gives me a spreadsheet of all your answers. So I know who's interested, who's intrigued, who's passionate. So I'd go ahead and consider right now. Feel free, grab your phone, pull it out. If you want to be involved in children or youth ministry in some way, text the word serve to 270-479-0629, and then be willing to work on the little short form that it will send you, okay? So adults, let's talk about adults. We are going to offer 3 adult co-ed classes. Let me clarify what I mean by that. There was a time when we toyed around with having a men's Bible study, a women's Bible study, and then a couples, like a co-ed Bible study for single people or married people who wanted to do it together. But then we realized that there were very, very few people in our current crowd who wanted to split up from their spouse the first time they went to something. Like most people kept going, I'd love to do a men's group like 3 months from now, but right now I want to stay with my wife and us get to know people together. So we just said, okay, no men's groups, no women's groups at first. We'll just give people an opportunity. So every group is co-ed. Doesn't matter if you're male or female, you're welcome and wanted. Every group is multi-age, so there's not a senior group and a young adult group. It's just anybody who wants to be involved. And again, if you text the word serve to that number, that form that you're going to get to fill out, one of the options is you can sign up for an adult Bible study, okay? There are 3 of those classes being taught. The first one is being taught by the MIMS, Heath and Michelle, I'm sorry. The MIMS are out today, but they're doing a class called Why Do You Believe? Okay, that's going to deal with some of the core Christian beliefs. Why do we believe those things? They will do a great job. Then Tim Threet is teaching the Bible class that I just described it as perceived tension between grace and law in the scriptures. Tim, you want to say anything beyond that about what that class will be like? Okay, that's fine for now. I don't know if you guys have caught on yet, but Tim loves the Bible, loves to teach the Bible, and digs out stuff not everybody catches. I'll just say it that way. So I'd encourage you to consider that one. If you don't know Tim, he'll do a great job. The Threets will do a great job in that class. And then the third one's very specific. Jason and Lynn Crenshaw, who, if you guys just wave for a second back in there, the pink shirt says alive on it. Let me give you a little background. There is a ministry called Celebrate Recovery that God has used all over America to help people with various different habits and hang-ups. But its sweet spot, if you will, are for those who are Christ followers who are dealing with addiction, okay? There's more to it than that. There's a lot more to it than that, but that's kind of a beginning place. Just in Western Kentucky especially, Celebrate Recovery has been all but annihilated by COVID. It's been really torn apart. Imagine, if you will, trying to do an anonymous-based ministry without being able to get together in the same room. Okay, so you don't give your name, you don't give your information, you don't give your email address, you don't tell anybody anything but your first name, and now you're not welcome to come in the same room together. What that means is that all over the world, especially America, but specifically here in Western Kentucky, I can speak, is that there are those who are Christ followers who are dealing heavily with addictions, whose safety and security net has been ripped out from under them. And it's why when all the other stores got closed, there were certain stores that didn't, right? Okay, now, Jason and Lynn have a history in leading this type of ministry. They've worked heavily in more than one of those types of ministries in the past. And there is a new version, if you will, of Celebrate Recovery called Recovery Alive that has been developed by one of the former executives of Celebrate Recovery. But the thing that's phenomenal about this one is that they are using a heavy amount of digital connection so that even in the midst of pandemic, people don't lose their connection. Okay? So think Celebrate Recovery with the backbone of a wonderful, what is it, Lynn, like 70-something online groups that meet weekly right now? They meet nationally, but they meet digitally, which means we can offer 70 support groups a week from day one, okay? So what they're doing is they're going to do a Bible study that is an exploration of whether or not Western Kentucky needs Recovery Alive, whether or not we as a church need to sponsor it, whether or not the core of that group needs to come from here, and whether or not our facility needs to be useful for that group to have a weekly meeting. I'm going to go ahead and tell you that it's funny that we're describing whether the question is whether or not, when in my mind the answer is already yes, like capital Y, capital E, capital S, yes. But what we're looking here is, who do we know that wants to be involved? Who do we know that wants to learn more? Who do we know that God might use? So I would encourage you, if you're someone in the room and you think God really, really, really might want to use me in this, then maybe that's the adult Bible study for you to get involved with, starting again 3 weeks from today, okay? Now, how do I get involved? And then Brad's going to stop talking. How do I get involved? Is you text the word serve to 270-479-0629. While those of you with a phone are getting it out and doing that, let me tell you, if technology is not your thing and you're like, I hate that our church is doing this tech stuff, I get it. It's okay. Don't feel left out. That's Todd. That's Stephanie. Go talk to them afterwards. Seriously. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's really okay for you to go to Todd and go, I want to work with teenagers, but I hate technology. I'm going to tell you, that might not be a good mix. It might not. It might not be a good mix. But I could totally hear somebody saying, I want to get involved in an adult Bible study, but I don't use technology. That's totally okay. That's Tim. Heath is not here. That's Lynn and Jason. Go talk to them. Say, hey, how can I get involved in your Bible study? I want to do that, okay? We would love for you to be involved. We're excited about the future, and we can't wait for what happens next, okay? Anybody have any questions before we step into a moment of worship and move toward the end of our day together? I've taken enough time that we probably should maybe shrink the amount of songs that we're going to do. Why don't you guys come and lead us in worship, and we'll respond to the Lord. Again, text serve to 270-479-0629, and then fill out that short form.